doing this, we should have done this a long time ago. We've known each other for several years now, and I want to interview you today. And the things that I want to talk to you about are things that I picked up on being around you. I consider myself a big thinker, someone who wants to think at a high level, and I've learned a lot from you. And so a lot of that is mindset based. Obviously, you've acquired a lot of skills and knowledge, but I just want to start with first of all, if you were to define what you do, like if you could put a title on yourself, and it doesn't have to be a standard title, whatever, what would that be?
First thing comes to mind would be an entrepreneur, but if you wanted to dig down deeper and put a structure around it, it would be a single family office, small single family office, which is essentially anybody that's doing multiple things, whether it's a real estate agent that's active real estate agent, also flipping houses or doing new construction, or in my case, you do anything from the healthcare space to real estate to M&A to venture capital, and it's basically just putting that in a structure that allows for you to operate all those under more or less one body, one entity, but it also has tax advantages and legal advantages as well. And so when I introduce myself, I do say, depending on who I'm around, if they understand what it is or not, I do say that I operate a small single family office. But everybody else, it's basically just a true-blooded entrepreneur.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, because when we first met and I picked up some things from you, one was the family office thing, yeah. Which I didn't know what that was. And so I think I have a better understanding of that. Someone who, it's a structure around entrepreneurship. Yeah. Would that be correct?
Yeah. So it's continuously defining. The original definition of a family office is actually more of a registered investment advisor, like an IRA or a wealth advisor, or somebody that manages other people's monies. But it also goes down to a concierge service, to travel, to tax planning, to accounting. I mean, legal. It has everything that a wealthy individual or a wealthy family or somebody that's built wealth over time might possibly need. They would outsource that to a family office. That's sort of and that family office would manage all that for them and allow them to do what they need to do in their, or what they want to do, I guess, at that level. But it has continued to change, and so now the next definition would be down to a single family office, which is what I identify as, which is more or less a single person. Typically, they're smaller. They don't you're very independent in what you do. You still manage a lot of your own stuff, and then you have multi-family offices, which goes back more towards the traditional sense, which is where you have a company that would manage two or three. So say if I had three of my wealthy buddies or prominent buddies. You don't even have to be truly wealthy in the grand scheme of millions and millions of dollars, but say they've got some several $100,000, maybe a couple million or something on the small scale, and they just want to offload a lot of the responsibilities of managing that wealth. Then essentially I would, if say I took them three on and I did those three plus mine, that would essentially become a multi-family office. The other transfer or change in definition is that typically people think of, like if you look up the definition of a family office, it says that you typically start a family office with anywhere from $30 to $50 million. And that threshold has come down tremendously. Okay. It's just not required anymore to have that amount of capital, more or less liquid or in assets, in order to be considered a family office. Again, it goes back more towards the structure of what you're doing, how you're structured as a family. Like I can give an example of mine. For example, is I have a trust, a holdings that's a trust, a living revocable trust that owns everything essentially, and then I have the Morris organization, which is my FO, if you will, that manages everything. It's the oversight, and then underneath it it owns each individual business, or it's like a pass-through to each individual business, and then each business that has, say in real estate, the assets that we own are all managed by the organization, but they're owned by the trust, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so putting those structures in place is essentially what creates that family office structure.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's back up. For someone to kind of acquire the knowledge that you had and the skills, and you're just not born that way.
That's for sure.
Tell me about your path to getting in and learning these types of strategies and things that you're working on. How did that start?
It really started out as just a hustler. I started out, as a general contractor. Got an opportunity to do some rehabs on apartments, and that led me to realizing the opportunity in importing cabinets and countertops and light fixtures, plumbing fixtures for apartments. Started a business doing that. It ramped up very quickly just because I already had the connection on the GC side of things. So I immediately went back to my people that already hired me and was like, hey, I can get you some cabinets, I can get you some fixtures, and so through a process, was able to land some projects, and then it ramped up from there. During that time, being just the way my mind works, there was a few other opportunities that popped up and that I pursued, and essentially was able to make an exit out of a couple of those, and which caused a little bit of a liquidity event. Then I said, hey, I wanted to focus on syndicating. I actually want to get into owning these apartments, because that was my world at the time. Everything that I was doing was, or not everything, but the majority of what I was doing was around apartments. So I went back to, by that time I'd built some network between other syndicators and started asking questions, finding out, number one, what is a syndication? How does it work? And then I actually tried my own hand at syndicating, and I failed because I wasn't able to complete a syndication. I didn't have the experience component that not a lot of gurus talk about, which is experience I had on the rehab side, but I didn't have experience in the eyes of the debt, meaning as a general partner, as in going through the process of acquiring, value adding, and exiting a large multifamily asset. And so I went to a couple of friends that I'd made along the way that have done it and had some deals. And I said, hey, would you let me partner with you? Can I get in? And they allowed me an opportunity to get in on the general partner side of things, as long as I helped raise some capital. Well, going down the route, I was like, okay, well, I'll go raise some capital. I hadn't really done it much other than friends and family and whatnot for smaller real estate deals, but started down this path of figuring out raising capital. Did okay, was able to get in on the GP, but what it did more than anything is it sparked the interest. I discovered this whole world of just capital markets, hedge funds, private equity funds, venture capital, and how these funds work, and how you can essentially pool money together to essentially buy anything. We could syndicate this microphone, we could syndicate this building. And so my perspective really changed between, it's not so much as like, oh, I can't afford, that building over there is way too much for me. It's how much equity would I need? How hard would the equity raise be? Like that. My mind started shifting, and so I started going down this rabbit hole of just capital markets and how they work, and that essentially is where I found the term family office, and just started reaching out, started getting closer. I'm a big believer in proximity. I still travel heavily today just to get around people that are performing at a higher level, and so I started reaching out, networking, started going out, trying to visit these people, trying to meet up with them, just to get around a family office and learn more about what it is. And the reason why I gravitated towards family office is because typically they are diversified between real estate, M&A, private equity. Some are even in venture capital, and public equities, private equities. They're just across the board diversified. And that's, so my love actually goes back to structuring deals. We've worked together on some stuff, and I think you can see that, my mind thinks, and how can I structure, that's my creative, is structuring deals and in a way that you can, legally raise capital and syndicate larger deals than you would be able to do. They might be able to do them by themselves, but they have their own problems with time and they don't necessarily want to be, running down subs or maintenance or whatever on an apartment building. They've got their own agendas. And so that is how I was able to find the family office. And then from there, I just dove in and, kept networking and and continuing to explore these private placements, they call them.
Yeah.
So,
what would you say to someone who, you alluded to it a second ago, you see these huge buildings or these huge structures or businesses, and you're just like, man, how does somebody take down something like that? Like, I can't possibly qualify, I don't have the funds to do that. And so you said that when you switch from thinking that way to the way you're thinking now, how has that changed your mindset on seeing those opportunities?
Yeah, so to me, the biggest one is really knowing what it takes or finding out. I mean, I didn't know at first. You got to find out, what does it take to take down a deal like that? What kind of leverage, what kind of debt are you going to be needing? What kind of equity are you going to be needing? What kind of team is needed to do that? A lot of this is experience. And so, I found out quick that I, just like with the debt, I didn't have the experience in the eyes of the lender to be able to go do that, 655 units. But what I did find out is that once you position yourself again in a syndication or in a fund or an offering, your team is the GP. So you go out and you bring in these other partners to partner with you that do have the experience, that do have the background, that checks all those boxes. And you again, like I said, it shifts your mind to where you start thinking about, let's talk about equity, access to capital. Some people may watch this or whatever and say, man, I don't know anybody with capital. Well, I didn't necessarily at the beginning either. And what I did was I was leading with the deal. Get a good deal, go out and get you a good team, and then utilize those to present well. Perception's reality nowadays. Mm-hmm. And so you present well to the capital, and they'll bite on the deal. The team may be so-so, or your presentation may be so-so, but if you got a really good deal that you was able to find or structure, and that's another thing too, is that in today's market, deals are, a great deal like what we used to find are hard to find. And so there's also advantageous deal structures too. And so once you understand, you get around these high net worths and family offices, and you start understanding that there's other motivations other than just return. For a perfect example would be your shoot, I'm having a mind blank, but it's your tax-free zones, where you can get in there for 10 years and essentially, not have any tax obligation. And so there, believe it or not, there are people in this world that don't need to make any more money. They just need to lower their tax burden. And so they will invest into these, gosh, I can't believe I'm having a mind blank, but into these deals that are in these certain areas that will allow them to have that tax haven, and they'll invest with you just to lower their tax burden. Yeah. And so once you start understanding the structure of the needs of the capital and structure and deal flow and team, you start piecing all those things together to where you can essentially create a very advantageous offering, and then you can just take it to the marketplace, and the capital's there. There's no shortage of money in this earth. I mean, on this world. I mean, that's one of the biggest ahas that I've probably even told you about that I have, is that, again, when you start getting around these people and you start finding out that, $1 million a month is nothing. I mean, there's people on YouTube making $1 million a month. You know what I'm saying? There's people that don't sell anything, more or less, There's people that do e-commerce. There's people in real estate. There's people in every facet of the world. There's people that are doing $1 million a month.
One thing I found interesting, just going through some of this with you, is that, and I believe you said something, I'm not sure how you said it, but, everything's pretty much the same. There's just some extra zeros on the end of it.
That's it.
Right, and I think most of us who look at average incomes and average all this, which is what most of the world falls into, right?
Yeah.
We're thinking at the ceiling, where there's a group of people who are at this ceiling. It's not better or worse, it's just a different area, and there's just extra zeros behind it. But the concepts are all the same. And like what you said, one of my mentors, Gary Keller, said this too. He said, you find the deal, the money will show up.
Correct. Yeah.
So if you don't have the funds, go find the deal.
Yeah.
And then find the people who have the money, and it'll show up. So I thought that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it's very true. Yeah. Very true. I mean, there's all forms of motivation out there. One of the ones that sticks out to me in the early days is, and I kind of coined it as post-hacking, and I may have mentioned this to you before, but there was a guy that was prominent in the multifamily space, syndicator. He was going live, touring an asset that he was trying to raise capital for. He was using social media, which is a great tool to raise some capital. And I got on there and just posted, said, hey, I've got a such and such unit in so many units in location. And there was a guy that pinged me back and said, hey, I'm interested, and then hit me on a private message, and then went to tell me that he had a 1031 exchange, that he only had like 5 days left to designate. He was in that location of the property that I was trying to syndicate, and he ended up doing $500,000.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And so his motivation was time, location. He wanted to. That's the reason why he hadn't allocated yet, because he was looking for something local. Well, he didn't know about this opportunity, obviously, and he owned a bunch of hotels and stuff, so he was more passive in that sense anyway. He wasn't necessarily out actively shopping real estate like I was at the time. And just through that, I was essentially able to bring in $500,000 in an LP position, which was great because it worked for him. It was timing, it was location, and the asset wasn't like a superstar asset. It was a decent little project, but there's no shortage out there, and there's no shortage of motivation. It's just, I think the hardest part is trying to figure that out, trying to figure out what is the motivation, what is, and I wish I had the golden goose answer to that, but for me, it's just trial and error. You gotta put it out there, you gotta try, you gotta ask a bunch of questions, put a bunch of offers out, see what happens. I mean, for that one story, I could tell you probably 50 that I put out and didn't get anything, get any response,
Yeah. So thinking about people who, myself included, right? There's times where what do I have to offer? What are some things that I can bring to the table? I think one thing I want you to expand on this that I've seen from people is they actually have more to bring to the table than they think they do.
Yeah.
And what are some of those different things people can tap into that they may not be aware of, or may be scared to tap into, that they can bring value to a deal or a situation? What were some of those things you think?
I'll just give you an example of myself. Same thing here. I kind of ran into that there at one time as well, and especially on these larger deals where you really are kind of pushing the ceiling of what your skill set is and your knowledge base is. Yeah. But you'd be surprised what people find value in. For me, I grew up on a tobacco farm in eastern Kentucky, small town, worked hard. That instilled a work ethic, which a lot of, you'd be surprised how many people admire a good work ethic. Being genuine is a trait of mine. I don't, not whether I want it or not. Sometimes it just comes, most of the time it just comes out. Well, that turns out to be a good trait to have. And so I would say, for me, what I did is I kind of, for a while, I kind of tried to hide the fact that I was country and had a country accent and all this stuff or whatever, right? Which is hard to hide. But what I did is I kind of looked back and said, okay, well, where do I come from? What did I do, on the growing up? What did I do that was that's kind of unique or and then outside of that, it goes back to still to this day, my knowledge of construction, for example. You wouldn't think that has much value in, a 250 unit apartment rehab, or even in a business acquisition, or even in venture capital. But, still to this day, that's probably one of the most valuable things that I bring to the table. And I can give you across all three spectrums. One is in multifamily, the knowledge of rehabbing units. That people's literally brought me in on deals just for my knowledge of rehabbing units and my track record in that. The second one would be in like an M&A model, looking at buying a business, and had this business under contract for a while. We ended up not closing on it due to some other factors, but my contracting background was enough to qualify for the experience component for the lender on acquiring this essentially import business. So there again, it showed up. And even most recently in the venture capital space, there's some guys I'm working with in Nashville that are a startup, and they're doing really well. Well, they have a device, sort of an IoT device, that is on water lines and stuff to prevent leakage and control consumption and stuff like that. But even having that knowledge of what is a line coming in, what is PEX, what is PVC, having those knowledge of structural components, was able to relate back to that, to where I could even add my spin on it to help them raise capital even more, which essentially gave me equity in the company. And so looking at your from where you are all the way back from this is basically what I did, from take out a piece of paper and write down from the growing up, where you were at, how you were raised, who you were raised by, your experience. I mean, like for you, for example, I didn't know this till the other day, but like your dad in baseball, the experience there. I mean, he coached Michael Jordan. I mean, give me a break. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, what were those experiences like? Writing down what that was like, what experiences you had throughout childhood, all the way up into college. I think college is very important. Post-college is important, and then I would call it your career. Just sort of jotting down everything you could think of over the past, however old you are, 36, 41, however old you are, write down everything that, comes to mind that was an experience or something that you took away from it. And then you got a list of essentially traits and value that you could bring to any deal, So like I could relate, your upbringing with your dad and playing ball and coaching, you could essentially, you could relate that back to, at young athletes, whether it's college level, pro athletes, having that connection there to where you can talk about that at that level. And maybe it's not even them, but maybe it's their children. Maybe your experiences as, being with, I hate to say professional, but being a child of a coach, and, at a high level, what does that look like for pro athletes' kids? You can relate to them. And so like there's multiple ways of connecting the dots. I think it just starts with getting it out of your head and getting it in a list. And so that's what I did, which helped me tremendously on, especially this, the capital markets. I mean, some of these guys I'm working with are just super high level, very, very smart, talk circles around me, but I had a guy tell me the other day, family office guy tell me the other day, he said, Will, he said, you have a unique ability to make complex things simple.
That is huge. And
So,
that is something I also learned from one of my mentors as well, is the genius out in the world is, I'll tell you, what is easy is to make something simple complex. We do it every day as human beings, right? We just make the simplest things so complex and more difficult than it needs to be. But the genius, according to my mentor, is to take something complex and make it very simple.
Yep.
So that is a very huge gift that you have, and that you can help people through deals, help people through a process by keeping things very, very simple.
Yeah, and he was relating it back to raising capital. When you go to raise capital, sometimes there are these complex strategies and prefs, equities, and splits, and waterfalls, and all these fancy terms. But at the end of the day, if you can make it pretty simple for them, and so
And I like what you said that about looking back through your life at experiences or things you've gone through, and how I kind of interpret that, just being from a real estate sales world, is defining your unique value proposition.
100%. Yeah.
We do it in sales, we do it in every business out there, but your own brand, your own personal brand is what I'm hearing you say, is what is your unique value proposition? And when you start thinking back, and I went through this exercise too, it's like, man, that situation there when, I was asked not to come back to University of Tennessee because of my academics. And then, I, just went and scheduled a meeting with the dean and put my Sunday clothes on and asked and begged and had a conversation about coming back, and I got back.
Yeah.
Like, that alone, like, can tell someone your determination and all those different types of things. So what type of stories like that can people really tap into? It may have been small at the time, may have been big at the time, you may have forgotten about it, but if we think back to those things, those are all stories that add up and really start defining your character and your value proposition. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap this thing up. staying on this theme of helping people kind of think outside the box, I guess discovering their genius, whatever it is. What do you think the biggest thing people overlook when they're thinking about what their value proposition is? Just in your experience.
For me, and what I think a lot of too is nowadays a lot of people try to impersonate, and they watch. Social media is probably part of this. They watch these gurus and these A-listers, whatever, professional athletes, all this stuff, and they try to mimic them. And what happens is you dilute your uniqueness, and what makes you valuable to the world and valuable to your clients. And you're trying. I think people try to be too much of a generalist. They try to go after mimicking the what you see, what you hear. And then that essentially becomes, you become a journalist at that point because you're essentially doing what everybody else is doing because they're all doing the same thing, versus leaning into your uniqueness and your unique abilities. And I think the reason why people do that a lot is because they're afraid of, everyone not liking them. But that's essentially what you want. Let's take real estate, for example. If I was in this market running, working just in this market, and this was my focus, I would want to find my niche group that I connect with that are going to connect with me. And I think it's important that can afford to pay you, because when you do start niching down, you do start becoming unique, price goes up. Why is a unique painting worth more than a copy or whatever? And it's because it's unique. It brings that value, that unique value. And so that's my thoughts, and it's even for me. Like I said, I told you I tried to hide the country accent, and I tried to get away from I tried to hide the fact that I was a country pumpkin, and because I was dealing with these big highfalutin people. But what I found out is that once I leaned into that, that's actually what made me stand out more. And so I can go into a meeting or pitch on a deal that these people probably see 100 pitches a day, and I can go in and stand out because I lean into it now, and I share those things that I've learned and experiences and whatnot. And so that's what I would say is that lean into your uniqueness and what makes you, and you'll find your tribe. What I'm saying? You'll find your person, your group of people inside of any market that will connect with you, resonate with you, like those traits. And then you're going to find a group of people that don't like your traits, and instead of trying to please them and make them happy, double down, provide extra value to the ones that do like you and want to work with you.
Awesome. I like it. So I'm hearing you say just be genuine.
100% be genuine. I think the world's losing genuineness, and it's easy to do in today's world, but I think that's the one thing that it's what attracts me. There's people that come to me. I get pitched all the time for deals and stuff, but the one thing, because at the end of the day, when you're working with somebody, I don't care if it's investing in them or if they're investing in you, you're buying a house from them, you're listing a house, like whatever, it's, at the end of the day, you're still doing business with people.
Yeah.
And you got to make sure that person has the right traits that you believe in and that you feel are right to be able to, get the job done, see it through the end, make sure they're not going to cut and run. I mean, every time that I ain't gonna say every time, but most recently, times that I deviated from that process and I did business with people that are outside the norm or outside what I would consider somebody I would want to work with, it don't end well,
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, thanks for
thanks for having me
for this, and we'll do many more conversations. And this is just the first of many. And I look forward to hearing more from what you're working on, and we're going to go more into detail on some different aspects, strategies, industries within the industry that we can talk about and get more knowledge on. So thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
All right.